Howdy everyone, my name is Shane Hanofee, and today our virtual hike is going to be at Drum Powerhouse Rd, which is located kind of in between Dutch Flat and Alta in Placer County near the 80 corridor. And yeah, we're gonna check out some of the plants that are growing here. It's kind of late in the season for this area. Most of the stuff that's flowering is earlier than now in mid-July, but there's definitely some interesting late season spots, especially where it's wet. And this area is um, it's very steep. It's kind of almost a one-way road. Um, I guess it's a little wider than a one-way road, but down below us here, you can see is the Bear River. That's the Placer and Nevada County line. So yeah, quite steep. And on this side are the Serpentine cliffs that this area is known for. So Serpentine contains a lot of endemic species, a lot of really interesting plants that have adapted to these harsh environments, you know, poor nutrients, high in heavy metals. So yeah, let's see what we can find on down the road here. So in addition to the Serpentine outcrops, there's lots of forested areas along Drum Powerhouse Road too, and you know, a lot of the wet areas have a lot of flowers going. So let me point out a couple of things that are happening over here. First of all, we have this gorgeous white flower arising from these palmate wide leaves. This one's pretty ubiquitous in our wet areas. This is Boykinia, the coast Boykinia, which still occurs out here. We have two species of Boykinia, one with much larger flowers, and that one's found at higher elevations. Over here, we have one I hope you're all familiar with, the Pacific Bleeding Heart, Dicentra formosa. Really beautiful flowers. It kind of spreads via rhizome and makes these colonies. Surprisingly still flowering here, because these will be flowering quite early in the year. And let's see, what else do we have? Well, we have a Gallium species. This one is Gallium triflorum, I believe is the name. It's the fragrant Gallium, which it has that name for I don't know what reason, because it doesn't have a smell. But it does have these, the leaflets are kind of wide, and they're in groups of 6, whorls of 6. And so this one's pretty easy to tell. It's kind of common in the woodland areas. We have a little bit of Euchera micrantha, the alum root or coral bells, depending on what common name you want to use. This one's rather small. They can get kind of big. And let's see. California Bay, we've covered that in a previous video, so I won't spend too much time on that. But here, check out the wall of the Boykinia, just growing all along this little drainage on the side of the road in the shade. It's kind of the perfect habitat for it. Here, this one, the Boykinia, that's in the Saxifrage family. Saxifragiaceae. And so, a lot of the plants in that family have these kind of wider leaves and send up their flowers up on stalks like this. Here's Aquilegia formosa. This is the western columbine. Might not be able to get it to focus on that. Another really common plant in the woodlands. Really gorgeous plant in the buttercup family. And check out the spurs that come off the back of the flowers there. And yeah, those hollow tubes in the center with the red petals. Here's a rather large seep monkey flower. They'll get pretty big wherever they can get constant water. And even though, you know, most of the exposed areas have dried out, this little drainage is providing enough water for this seep monkey flower to get quite large. And so, yeah, seep monkey flower is Erythranthe guttata. And you can see, oh, it's got some aphids on it, taking advantage of the fact that this has a lot of water in its tissues right now and keep from drying out themselves. And look how when the flowers fall off, the stigma is still attached and still sticking out there. That's pretty neat. And lastly, what I'll show in this area is this nice big ribes. This is ribes nevadense. It is the pink flowering currant. It has a group of pink flowers, and then that's followed by these sort of light blue berries, a group of light blue berries, and they are edible. However, they're not very tasty. They're kind of bitter and bland, but you know, you could eat one without getting into too much trouble. And around here, pretty much Ribes nevadense is one of the most common shrubs, and maybe Ribes roselii, the Sierra gooseberry, which has spiky fruit. And you know, this even though currants and gooseberries are in the same genus, which is Ribes, we colloquially refer to gooseberries as the ones that have thorns, and currants as the ones that lack thorns. And this one is a currant due to the fact that it lacks thorns along the stem. The Ribes roselii, Sierra gooseberry, is quite thorny. So yeah, pay attention to whether you have thorns or not on some of your Ribes species. But yeah, they're closely enough related that we still refer to them by the same genus. All right, I am back on the Serpentine outcrops, and so I wanted to point out kind of how you can tell that you're in a Serpentine area. And what you're going to be looking for is these sort of shiny, almost greasy or soapy looking rocks. You know, they have a bit of a luster to them, and oftentimes they erode. And so at the bottoms of the cliffs, you'll find these talus piles here where all of the rocks have kind of conglomerated. And believe it or not, there's some plants that have survived or have adapted to survive in that kind of thing, like this onion here. And I'm not going to be able to tell you which onion species this is, but it's certainly an onion. You can see this is the original leaf that came up early in the spring, and it was like a bluish greenish color, and at this point it has dried out and given rise to this flower stalk with pink flowers. Pretty dense cluster for an onion, and you can always tell you have an onion by just rubbing the skin a little bit and giving it a smell, because it will have an onion smell. And so down there in the talus there is a bulb buried, which has managed to grow and hang on, and pretty soon these are pretty much done flowering. They're going to be setting seed, and if those seeds can wiggle their way into this serpentine talus and germinate, you'll get a new bulb and a nice little population of whatever onion this is. So yeah. Important thing to note about serpentines is I had mentioned serpentine endemic species, and those are species that evolved and require serpentine, and you know, they're adapted. They're only found on serpentine. An example of that would be this plant right here. It's got very tiny flowers, so hopefully you can make that out. But this is Streptanthus polygaloides, the milkwort jewel flower. It has tiny little purple compressed flowers that are very ornate if you get to look at them up close. This one is an indicator species that you're on serpentine. It only grows on serpentine. This is in the brassica family. Check out those pods right there, kind of reminiscent of mustards and even broccoli and kale and stuff. They're all in the same family there. And so yeah, this one only grows on serpentine soil. So if you see this plant, you know you're on serpentine. And then there are plants that are sort of tolerant of serpentine, but they'll grow elsewhere. An example of that would be this guy right here. And again, going to be kind of hard to make out these tiny flowers, but this is Antirrhinum breweri, I believe. Or actually, I think it's Antirrhinum vexicol. It has a really long and complicated scientific name, and the variety is breweri. But this one can tolerate the serpentine soils, but you'll find it elsewhere as well. Certainly it is adapted to hot and dry, rocky areas. That's where it likes to grow. It's in the snapdragon family, and you know, again, I can't really make it out with my camera as is, but the flowers are really cool. They almost have these two little bunny ears that pop up there. Look like a little rabbit or something. So it can be really easy to tell these. I think they call it a brewer's snapdragon, if I'm remembering that correctly. One way to tell that you have the brewer's one is you want to look at the flowers, and there'll be like a little leaf coming out of the bottom underneath each flower, and it's got kind of a wiry appearance, and then the stem and the leaves are very glandular, hairy. So that's what to look out for. It's kind of a late season bloomer, isn't it? We're seeing it out here in the middle of July. This Streptanthus is actually really surprising that it's blooming here, because that's one I'd normally associate with an earlier season bloom, but here we are. It's managing to hang on. So another plant that is tolerant of serpentines is this one right here, which you might not be able to see real well because it is known as the naked buckwheat. So you have this rosette of basal leaves down here, very reminiscent of buckwheat, wild buckwheat, Eriogonum leaves, and then it will follow a naked stem, so leafless, although to be honest, there are some leaves. That's not tried and true, it's just mostly naked, we should just say that. And then up to these little white flowers that exist at the tops. And so this is a little cluster of flowers there. There's multiple flowers. And this one is really common. It's found from low elevations to high elevations and everywhere in between. There's a bunch of different subspecies of them, which I can't tell apart, but it is one of the more recognizable and identifiable wild buckwheats that we have. Just look for that basal leaf and the naked stem, maybe a few leaves at some of these nodes here, but for the most part, none of the other buckwheats get this tall from that basal rosette. A lot of them are more like mat forming, or will have, bright yellow flowers or red flowers or that kind of thing. So the white flowered, tall stem, basal rosette. You probably have Eriogonum nudum, the naked stem buckwheat. Here's a gorgeous plant of sort of open rocky areas that I can't get any closer than this to because it is up on this cliff and it's quite slippery. I don't want to fall. But this is Dendromicon rigida, the bush poppy. It is, in the poppy family, Papavervaceae, and it is one that's very highly fire adapted. So in fire scars on these sort of serpentine areas or rocky areas in general, at the middle low elevations, you'll get bush poppy germinating a lot of the time. And just look at those beautiful golden flowers there. And right below it, you can see there's a red flower. That is one of our Indian paintbrushes, one of the Castanea species. I can't get close enough to even make a guess as to what species they are, but they are also really hard to identify. And it's very likely, because of the place that it's growing, that it is parasitizing that bush poppy there, because members of that family are partial parasites. At least they make a little bit of their own food, but then they also tap into the root systems of whatever host plant they're growing on. And yeah, it helps them sort of survive living in nutrient poor environments like these serpentine outcrops. And the last thing to show you over here is this really nondescript plant. Can you even see that right there? It's like a purplish, thin, wiry, very hairy plant right here. This guy right here is a very interesting group of plants. These are also in the paintbrush family. I'm going to see if I can get it to focus on one of these flowers because it might be kind of hard to make out here, but there you go. That's a flower, believe it or not. It looks kind of just like vegetative, but you can see there's a little bit of white on the side there. This is the plant in full flower. This right here is Cordylanthus tenuis, or one of the bird's beaks. They call them bird's beaks. I mean, it kind of looks like a bird's beak, right? Another plant in the paintbrush family, you can see it's almost has just a very light green color to it. It's mainly purple, actually. And the purple coloration is actually to protect it from the sun's rays. And the hairs, the hairs also help. It's kind of like hairiness or tomentousness, like this woolly sunflower right here, that like whitish, bloomish color on it. That's actually a form of like plant sunscreen. So it's just to help protecting the plant from the sun's rays. And you'll find it's really common that plants that grow in open rocky places will have coloration like that. And so yeah, I just thought it was pretty neat to show that this plant, you'd walk right by it and not even know it was in flower. I mean, but when you dissect them, and I can't do that and also hold the camera, but when you dissect one of these flowers, the middle of it there has a really stark coloration, stripes of yellows and whites and reds and greens. If you peel off these bracts there, here, maybe we can do it a little bit. Maybe I can manage. Maybe not, actually. But another thing that's really cool about these guys inside the flower is the anthers are like really hairy. They have these long filaments, or sorry, not the anthers, but the filaments are really hairy. The anthers are on the ends of the filaments. So yeah, the filaments are really hairy. Pretty much the whole plant is hairy, but not the petals when you open up the flower. And then all of a sudden there are these like really long silky hairs on the male parts of the flower, on the filaments that hold up the anthers. So yeah, this is Cordylanthus tenuis. Maybe it's slender bird's beak. All the Cordylanthus are known as bird beaks, and there's a couple different species, but yeah. Anyway, Cordylanthus tenuis. All right, we are at probably one of my favorite habitats in our area, and that is, like, we're right near these serpentine outcrops, but over here we have a little drainage with the stream running through, and so anytime you get serpentine plus water, you're gonna get really interesting plants. And one of those being this plant right here with these enormous, I mean, look how big those leaves are, enormous leaves, and check out these flowers. Little, like fireworks, you know, extending from this flower stalk right here. And so this plant right here is Aurelia californica. This is known as elk clover. And believe it or not, this dies back to the ground every year. So all of the growth that you're seeing, these enormous leaves, you know, this is easily 6 feet tall, happens in one season. So it invests a lot of energy. It's probably why it has such big leaves. It's trying to collect as much energy from the sun as possible in its growing season. And it will only grow in these wet areas. So it's pretty common in those wet areas. Probably owing to how successful it is, but yeah, I'm really partial to those flower stalks. It's really a treat when they're finally going. And what else do we got over here? Certainly we have a ubiquitous, some kind of willow species, probably arroyo willow, growing anywhere where there's wetness, you're going to get willows. That's pretty much a guarantee. We have more of the seep monkey flower and the boykinia that we mentioned earlier. And this guy right here is in the pea family. This is a Lathyrus, and I believe this is Lathyrus gypsonii, but I might be wrong on that. Certainly it's quite large. You have these kind of winged stems. You have kind of small stipules. You have opposite or maybe even sub-opposite leaflets. And here are the fruits right here. It's kind of out of flower already, but you can see there's kind of the remnants of some flowers on there. Very cool plant, very large and growing here in this, you know, in this drainage. Got some active water going on. And what else do we have? We have Hosakia oblongifolia. I think that's the epithet anyway. It's certainly the stream bank bird's foot trefoil is the common name. And so yeah, look at those really cool flowers. Another one in the pea family. You can see it's kind of, the seeds are more rounded than the Lathyrus, but certainly they look like pea pods, right? And these divided leaves, that's something that's really, really common. Here is a plant called Prunella vulgaris, and I believe it's a subspecies lanceolata. This is one of 2 subspecies we have, one with more lance shape, so longer leaves, or one with more rounded leaves. And I believe, if I'm correct about this, that the lance leaf one is a native and the round leaf one is a non-native. So yeah, it's in the mint family. The common name is self-heal or heal-all. Really cool plant, really common, spreads like crazy. If you have it in your yard, you probably know that already. All right, what else do we got? We have that big white spike right there, which I'm not going to be able to get closer to because of the stream here. This is our Sierra bog orchid. That's Platanothera dilatata leucostachys, variety leucostachys. Notice the white flowers growing in a wet area. And yeah, very cool, one of our native orchids. And over here, we have a gorgeous little stand of Lilium pardalinum, one of those. So this is a lily, native lily, that grows in wet places. And one thing you can notice right here is there's 2 color tones. See that? So lighter orange down here where the spots are, and almost like a reddish color at the top. So that's one way to tell you have pardalinum. Certainly the fact that it's growing in a wet area, and the fact that the flowers are nodding down, right? So, you know, it's not pointing up like Lilium parvum. But yeah, lilies are quite amazing plants, aren't they? Really gorgeous. And so yeah, there's this bunch of mosses too. We could get into mosses maybe another time. Certainly ubiquitous wherever it's wet even seasonally. And then there's more columbine. We have a dogwood. Not exactly sure what kind of dogwood that is. Maybe Cornus sessilis, the black fruit dogwood. And then a white alder. You know, pretty much anywhere you get wetness, you'll get an alder. And this is, you know, as opposed to our last video, we talked about the mountain alder. This is the white alder, which has, you know, singly toothed leaves, a lot less thick, grows a lot bigger, found at lower elevations compared to the mountain one. But all right, let's head on out to the next place. So here's one of the sad things about Drum Powerhouse Road is there's this sort of informal shooting range out here, right? I mean, look at those beautiful serpentine cliffs, and there's a stream running along the side with beautiful plants, and the place is just completely trashed. I mean, there's just so much litter here, an unbelievable amount of trash, and they will pretty much shoot everything. We've noticed them shooting the heads off of the plants. You know, there's a children's slide that's been shot up. Pretty much anything that's out on this range has just been peppered, and as you can see, I'm just walking through constant shotgun shells and bullet casings and bullets lying in the ground. And then if you can see in the back there, there's two trees. Those used to be standing. They actually just kept firing on them over and over again until they shot down the trees. So, you know, any plants that are going to be trying to hang on in this area are going to certainly face some challenges, and pretty much all at the hands of human beings. Yeah. So here, there's a snare drum. Just shot that all to hell. All sorts of shaving cream and spray paint. It's just so much trash here. And luckily, you know, I got here at a time where there's no one firing, so we can walk out here. One of the more disconcerting parts is, you know, walking along the trail, or, you know, walking along the road and looking for really interesting and unique plants, and all you can hear are guns going off. And so, yeah, check this out. Come over this edge and just look at the number of lilies that are over here. I mean, you got a little bit of the invasive sweet pea in there, but there's also some angelica growing. Just really robust individuals. I think this is also Lilium pardalinum. Pardon my pardalinum mispronunciations. And, you know, this would be an amazing botanical spot. But it's a little dangerous to be out here, to be honest. And look, right below the Serpentine cliffs. Nice and shiny. And just insane numbers of the lily growing in this area. So what a shame that it's just been absolutely trashed by, you know, people with their guns. Okay, so we are at what I think is our last stop of the day. I wanted to point out this really nice population of this rather large plant in the carrot family. I believe this is Angelica breweri, or Brewer's Angelica. So yeah, that's a pretty easy binomial to remember, isn't it? Angelica breweri, Brewer's Angelica. But yeah, and then over here, we have a nice little patch of the seep monkey flower again. You'll notice these are quite small. They're only a couple inches tall compared to the one that we saw at the beginning of the video, which was, what, 2 feet tall? And, you know, there's just a lot of variation in that species. They can be really small or really big, depending on how much water they get and how much sun they get. And so these ones, kind of on this rock outcrop, are not getting as much water as the ones growing in a seep where their roots are constantly wet, and so they'll be a lot smaller. And I believe actually there's some work being done on this right now where they might end up teasing out all of these different forms of the highly variable species into several different species with sort of concrete characteristics. But that's coming down the pipeline. That remains to be seen. And over here, we have a wonderful fern known as the Indian dream fern, or the serpentine fern. This is Aspidotus densa. It has very wiry black stems, see those down there? And these kind of highly divided leaves. And on the back, let's see if this one is mature. Yeah, more or less. So you're probably not going to be able to make it out because they're kind of small. But the sori are born on the back, and they're kind of like linear. So they're little like slits on the back, which contain all of the spore-bearing sori. And so this one is, though not exclusively found, oftentimes it is found on serpentine, hence the name serpentine fern. And this little patch here is sort of almost designating the boundary between like this wooded kind of area over here, more or less wooded, and those very obvious serpentine outcrops over on the right side. So yeah, serpentine fern. There's only one other potential Aspedotus species, one other look-alike that would occur around here. That's Aspedotus californica, but it's really uncommon. So if you're seeing a fern with that kind of shape, chances are you've got the serpentine fern, and if you're on serpentine, almost definitely that will be the serpentine fern. And so here we are. There's some more of the seat monkey flower. Notice how these ones are much bigger because they're growing in the drainage, and so they're getting more water than these ones that are up on the cliffs a little bit and have a lot more of that water kind of just seeping out and away from their roots. And we have a really nice florific columbine there. Columbine seems to be in full bloom around these parts. And what else can we see? Well, we got a rush species. Rushes are kind of difficult to tease apart, but they're pretty common in the wet areas. These are the flowers coming out of the middle of the stalk. And there's an old saying between the graminodes, which are all the grass-like herbs, that sedges have edges, rushes are round, and grasses are hollow all the way to the ground. And I just wanted to point out that that's not necessarily true, although it's generally true. So it's a rule of thumb that you can go by, but just know that there's occasional sedges that are round or rushes that are hollow and this kind of thing. So yeah, just thought I'd point them out. They don't get nearly as much love as they deserve, the rushes and sedges and grasses, but there's some absolutely beautiful ones out there that, if you can take the time to learn them, you'll have a much greater appreciation of our local plants. And certainly they're really abundant. There's just a lot of species of them. So that can be kind of intimidating to try to get into, but, or, if you're the kind of person who likes a challenge, that might be a good place to start. All right, and the last thing we are going to talk about today is this beautiful cluster of flowers. I enjoy it almost as much as the bees there. You can see there's a bombus up in the upper right corner there, enjoying this. This is Collinsia tinctoria, or tinctora, I forget which one, whether there's an I or not. This is sticky Chinese houses, and very, very distinct one because of those, look at those dots on the leaves. There's no other Collinsia, at least that I know about or that occurs around over here, that has dots like that. A really interesting plant, really beautiful annual that grows in these clumps. And like I said, the insects just love it. That bee is still going nuts. But yeah, so I think that'll do it for us today. And I just wanted to thank you all for watching these videos. They're a pleasure to make, and I'm so happy to be able to share this information with everyone. And yeah, visit our Facebook page or our Instagram page. Check out the other videos on our YouTube channel. Join our forum. Our forum, you can ask about, you can get help from a bunch of local experts on the plants you're finding. You can get tips on how to grow native plants, and pretty much any native plant topic you want to discuss is totally open there. Just show off some of your photography, or ask, what is this plant I found in my yard, and you'll get help from some local people who know the local plants really well and can help you kind of figure out what you got there, and hopefully cultivate a greater appreciation of the native plants of Placer and Nevada County. So anyway, thank you for watching.